You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld. You might have guessed that. More importantly, I have a special guest today. It's Steve Portigal. Steve, hello.
Lou, hello.
I think this is at least number 2, maybe number 3, but it is of your guest appearances. You're on the leaderboard for the Rosenfeld Review, but this is a special occasion because Steve, who you may already know, you probably almost certainly know, wrote the now classic Rosenfeld media book, Interviewing Users, 10 years ago, 2013. Well, the second edition is now out. Well, it's almost out. Technically, it is on pre-order at 15% off. The formal launch date is October 17th, 2023. We're very excited about that, and we're very excited to have you here, Steve.
Great to see you, Lou. Great to talk with you.
Yeah.
And talk over you.
It's our second edition. And it's great to commemorate that decade and look at what's changed over that decade. But I before we get into what's different and what are the nuts and bolts about the book, it occurred to me that not everyone knows you or knows what you do. You're at this point where you've kind of reached this level of, well, he's a famous guy. But even famous guys do stuff. Like they got to earn a living and they got to figure out the stuff they know so that they can write about it. Mm-hmm. Well, what have you been up to? How do you know what you know? Isn't this It seems like a line from BoJack Horseman, celebrities.
What do they know and how do they know it?
Thank you. I knew you could help me out there.
I'm sure that's right.
Pretty close.
We're getting some BoJack experts tearing us apart in the comments here.
We can only hope.
Yeah. I am in my 22nd year of my consulting practice as a user researcher. So I'm, with some frequency interviewing users, helping companies learn things and try to make sense of it and apply what we learn from users to their products, their services, how they think about their business or their culture or their brand. And as part of that, I also work to help companies build a more mature research practice, go from wherever they are to wherever they're going to be. And sometimes that's just straight up teaching. Mm-hmm. The books and workshops, are all connected. It's all different ways, I think, of looking at the same kind of expertise and transferring that expertise. So I teach a lot of people and I interview a lot of people and those are really great in combination. Like there's one of the most I think fruitful periods of my professional life was actually when I was putting the wraps on the first edition 10 years ago, and I was just in this flurry of writing stuff, teaching people and doing research, and there's nothing like teaching somebody how to do something and then going and screwing it up yourself. But because you've taught somebody else, then you realize, oh, right, I've explicitly articulated this point or this principle here. And then being able to write that or writing something and then being able to teach it to somebody because it's fresh. Like every time you kind of engage with that same bit of wisdom or practice through a different lens, the writing gets better, the teaching gets better, my own practice gets better.
Yeah, I always felt like I've been in the same boat, and I've always felt like it's a three-legged stool. It's writing, teaching, consulting. You take one of those away and the others can collapse. I wonder if you have been in a position where you've been interviewed as a user. So the reason I'm asking is I just got back from a bunch of time in Vienna and Amsterdam where I was on 2 conference programs, one for the Intersection Conference and one for Euro IA. I had a great experience at both. But one of the reasons I did it isn't because I necessarily have so much new to say, as much as I like to know as a conference producer what it's like to be on the other side and kind of reconnect with the experience of being a speaker, and therefore making sure I hopefully continue to have some empathy for people who are speaking at our events. Have you been in that sort of other side of the interviewing process, and what's that done for you?
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, I'm in one right now, right? I'm being
Hmm.
interviewed by you, although being interviewed for a podcast is not like being interviewed as a user. Um, yeah. I've been interviewed as a user. I've been interviewed as an expert, which is somewhere in between these two. Um, and it's always interesting in those cases because I feel some tension between, I can see, how the sausage is made. I can see what they're trying to do, and you know, it gives you tremendous empathy. People I've been interviewed about things as a user where they have their own idea of what they want to talk about with me, and I feel like the bigger problem is something else. And right, and I mean that's why we don't read off of a script, right? We
Hmm.
try to follow the person, see where they are, and look for these cues. It's extremely tense to be in that chair. Like, if this is about my experience and you're going to get me going to share about it authentically, like, I got stuff to tell you, and if you don't ask me about that or give me space for that, then I feel a little anxious. But also sometimes I have to remember, like, this is somebody else's session, not mine. Like, I'm being interviewed because they want something, so maybe I need to, like, turn it down, Steve, and just let them get to what they want to get. um, and so it's not either any of those things. I think just sitting with that discomfort, to use kind of an overworked phrase, like, I think being in that mode of feeling, having empathy for the person who's interviewing, because what you can see what they're doing and what it's
Hmm.
like, and having empathy for the interviewee, I'm sorry, who has sort of a different set of feelings, um, is, I don't know, it's entertaining at worst, and I think insightful about it at best. And you can always ask yourself, well, geez, what would I have done differently? I'm sure you came back from that conference. I mean, I know you probably have a list of like 6 things you're going to put into your program to either leverage a successful thing that you had, or to, like, counteract a gap that you uncovered.
Well, you're being very generous. It's actually four things, but um, but let me ask you this. So, in the 10 years since the first edition came out, have you seen? I mean, obviously you've changed, but have you seen interviewees come with? I was going to say different baggage, but that's not really. That's kind of a
Yeah.
negative term. Like, do you find that, for example, they're more aware of users being interviewed and have something they want to communicate in a way that 10 years ago maybe they were just more like deer in the headlights and, oh, whatever you ask me about I'll tell you about, but I don't have an agenda.
I mean, I don't know if I have exactly an example of that, and I'm not sure I can put it on the 10-year trajectory, but I think, let's just say, over the course of my career, I've seen people being interviewed, have more language. Their natural language looks more like kind of like consumer versus producer. There is some blurring, and that may just be just what how the population is. I mean, I remember the first time interviewing somebody who talked about price point, and,
Hmm.
like, that's a phrase that we all say, and we just think that's normal and how normal people talk.
We in our
Um,
industry. Yeah.
Yes, right. We, you and I, and probably many people who'll be listening to this, whatever jargon. And, it's not like there's we all are consumers, and many of us, there are a few people who are just, I don't know, we have these, they're just a pure consumer. They just sit around and drive minivans and wear sweaters and go to retail, right? And, like, we're all participating in this, in capitalism. I say all, but many of us are in the production and consumption of things. And
Whether we
people
like it
work
or
in
not.
right. People work in professions where they have access to the language that we used to think was just ours. And you see it kind of in the media. Um, I remember sort of hearing people talking about their own consumption behavior as research. That's sort of natural to say, like, oh yeah, I research something before I buy it.
Right.
But that you could go back to a period where no one would have framed their behavior that way.
So the
Which
language is definitely maybe a little different. The sort of awareness of it sounds almost as if like they have more expectations of products and maybe do more comparisons, and maybe people are reviewing because there's so many good sources of reviews, whether you're looking at Wirecutter or Amazon customer reviews, whatever it might be. Now, do these changes make it easier for someone doing interviewing of users? Does it allow you to sort of like leapfrog over some of the setup that you might have had to do 10 years or ago or further back?
I don't think so. I don't see it as kind of easier. I mean, I think our job is to kind of meet people where they're at.
Hmm.
And so we always have to pay attention to that. And I mean, we're talking a lot about consumers, and I have to be honest, I rarely interview consumers in my work these days, given who's hiring me or where the emphasis is. I do a lot more. I don't know that enterprise is the right word, but like employee experience and people doing technical work and so on. Um, so I've sort of I feel like I put my foot in a little bit. Like I don't know if the consumer quote,
Hmm.
as if that's a thing, is sort of easier to interview or is sort of more savvy about it. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm going to
So,
backtrack a little bit, Luke.
well, that's fine. I mean, do you feel that? I mean, I'm really interested to know about the sort of transformation of your clientele. Like, you may not be working in consumer products like you might have been 10 years ago. Maybe you're doing more enterprise. What do you think that says about the evolution of user research?
Yeah, I can answer it from the lens of a person with a tiny consulting practice, right? Why am I, as a provider of services, doing less consumer and more kind of business to business or within business stuff? And I guess I'm going to surmise that it is the growth of user research. I mean, it's the growth of UX, it's the growth of products, sort of all the disciplines that come together to try to make better products that are better suited to people. I mean, how many years ago did you start running a conference about design in the enterprise? Like, it was, I think, 10 years ago you didn't have that. Without checking my timeline here. So, over 10 years, um, that part of that side of the industry is bought into this, is
Hmm.
investing in it, is doing it, is staffing it, is making it part of their process. So, those changes, I think, it makes sense that, yeah, as someone who's a research practitioner, like, I'd be doing more of that because there's more of it happening than there was. Um,
Do you think that
yeah.
there's any kind of like just picking on the whole consumer side of things? Do you think the companies that might have brought you in 10 years ago don't as much now because they have built their own practices internally?
Yes, I mean, that is a significant change over 10 years, right? Is
Hmm.
the massive, at least up until 18 months ago, massive scope of some of these in-house research practices, and multiple layers of management, leaders, specialties, quantitative user research, qualitative user research, folding in market research, these growth of these large practices. Has that happened more in consumer than enterprise? Probably. I don't know. Uh, I don't have any data to kind of support that, but it seems sort of anecdotally to be a good take. But it's not like I don't do work with companies that have their own researchers, because most have something. And so the differentiator that I have is going to vary between those companies.
Well, and usually, I mean, I guess I'm asking you these questions to some degree because you're sort of at, to use a horrible term, the leading edge in user research, and certainly like, where you were brought in to do, to run interviews years back. The same companies may now have the practices that you're being brought in to teach. And whereas other kinds of organizations may be still bringing you in to lead interviews. Looking ahead, you have no data because I don't think you have a time machine, but would you, like 10 years from now, who would you guess is going to be bringing you in? Who's going to be at that edge of like, we are buying in your research? What's that?
My nurse is going to be bringing me in from the day room in 10 years.
Yeah, there you go.
Where's the market going to go? And I mean, I think this interesting question. I'm gonna quote Kate Towsey's wonderful term, "People who do research," which she's written about and is writing about.
Oh, yes, she is.
Yes. I mean, the idea that research is done by researchers is like really, really quaint. And I'm sure it's always never been done by researchers, but Kate creating the term "people who do research," I think, is a lovely way to formalize and acknowledge that research is an activity. It's also a discipline and a job title and a role, but it is an activity. It looks very different depending on who's doing it, depending on their background and their skill. And so I've wondered for years, it's not will there be research, but will there be researchers? And right now, there's a lot of hand-wringing and anxiety about, upheaval in the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, lots of people have sort of claimed very loudly the single reason that is going on. I don't know what the single reason is. It seems very messy and cyclical, right? And we've seen these pendulum swing back and forth over the years. I don't know that I can predict who's going to be doing research in 10 years and what we're going to be calling them, and what should those organizations be structured like. I think those are some really great problems for in-house research leaders those are people that work really hard to make organizational change through something that can be sometimes very tactical, but trying to change how companies think and talk about users. Yeah, they're the ones that are going to be prototyping this.
Those in-house research leaders, all 8 of them who are left.
That'll be left.
All 8 of them who remain. No.
Right.
I mean, I do think, just the hand-wringing is understandable, and every explanation of the shitstorm of the last 18 months, all I could say is there's no one reason. It's all of the above. Everything that's been mentioned is true, and it's yes and is a phrase that I learned from you. But we should talk about what's different in the book itself, not just the industry. But we're going to do that after the break. Everyone, guess what? If you didn't know it before, you are listening to the Rosenfeld Review, and we'll be right back. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you want more, not only do we have a whole bunch of podcasts in our archive, but we have something that's very current, very alive, and very engaging for groups, and that is our communities. Rosenfeld Media runs a variety of communities that meet on a monthly basis for video conferences on a variety of topics near and dear to UX people, ranging from enterprise experience to advancing research to design and research operations. I want to encourage you to join one of our communities. Again, it is free by going to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. Not only will you get a monthly video conference that you can listen in on and participate in, ask questions and so forth. We'll give you access to the recordings. And for some of those communities, we're talking about dozens of recordings with really interesting presenters and facilitators. You'll also get a newsletter. You'll get access to an advice columnist. Yes, we actually are providing advice columnists for each community. And finally, if you're interested in our conferences, our communities correspond to our conferences. So you will be the first to know when programs go live, when tickets go on sale, and by the way, most of our conferences sell out, and other good things about our conferences, such as when the scholarship applications open up. So go to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. You're going to find something that's free, something that's interesting, and it's a great opportunity to find your tribe as well. We'll see you there. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. My guest is Steve Portigal. We're talking about his new edition of an old book, Interviewing Users, the second edition, coming out October 17th of 2023. While we're talking about Steve's books, I will say they are books. In fact, he did another Rosenfeld book, Doorbells, Danger, and Dead Batteries, just wonderful compilation of user research war stories. That's actually the subtitle. You should have it on your radar as well. But let's get back to Interviewing Users, second edition. There's two new chapters, one on synthesis and insight, which is one of my all-time favorite topics. So I'm so glad you've taken a crack at it in the second edition, and also on the impact that you can make with research. Let's start with the former. Why did you want to have that chapter on synthesis and insight? Because I liked it, or some other reason?
Yeah, I know who to appeal to, right?
Play to the masses, or to the mass, yes, in this case.
It was kind of briefly acknowledged as there was some brief information in the first edition, and I think in writing the first book, trying to figure out how do you draw kind of a perimeter around what to cover, and the that book was sort of how to do the interview part, and I think I just chose okay, here's where we're done. There's more. The work is ongoing. And I think just over the years, it's felt like, boy, when I teach, I really need to give people a handle on this. If you don't do the analysis and synthesis, you lose so much of the value of the research that you've done. So to kind of say, hey, here's how to get really clear insights, and have strong rapport with people and really listen to them. If we don't talk about what do you do with that? What do you really do with that? Then I think I guess it was an attempt to correct or revisit a decision I'd made earlier. It was just an obvious oh, wow, I planted a seed kind of 10 years ago, but I really want to explain how to do this. And I have just more experience teaching it and kind of walking people through it and seeing where the light bulb goes off for them or seeing where it doesn't, kind of coaching them through that. And maybe I felt a little more confident that, yeah, I think I can unpack this for people in a way that they can be more mindful and intentional and kind of working their way through what does all this stuff mean, and what are we going to do with it?
What's one nugget of advice that gives a taste of what you cover in that chapter?
Without sort of reading it over, I want to say something. I think, well,
don't you hate it or
not?
Don't you hate it, Steve, as an author, when some schmuck says, oh, on page 76 of your book, you said, well, you know what you said. Tell me about it.
At least we could turn to page 76 if that was the question. One of the things that I talk about, and we could go find out after where it is in the book, but and I kind of sort of alluded to this. I think people don't realize that there's a process for analysis and synthesis. It's that, and that analysis and, boy, Lou, I'm going to give you more than a nugget here. Analysis and synthesis are two very, very different things, and you need to do both of them. Analysis is breaking bigger things down into smaller things. So you talk to somebody for an hour and you come out with 10 interesting things that they said. So you've taken 1 hour worth of material and you've got 10 sentences out of it. So that's breaking it down. Synthesis is putting that back together. And I think that's where sometimes people fail. They just tabulate the kind of things. They just break it down. And it gets into the impact stuff we can talk about in a minute. But the so what barrier that we have to kind of cross with our research, sharing research, 10 interesting tidbits or 10 for each interview tidbits are not actionable. The synthesis is building those 10 plus 10 plus 10, into new things. And those are things that no one ever said. They're not quotes, they're not verbatims. They're your new ideas that are a new thing that you made by combining these broken up bits into a new framework or idea or model.
Insight.
Yes, and I feel like that's what insight is. I don't know if this is in the book, but I often am angry at people that say, "Oh, I talked to somebody and I got 10 insights." No, you broke it down into 10 little takeaways. Insight is something that I think you produce anew by combining disparate stuff in a fresh new way, and that's the creative part of research. And I think it's underutilized, and I really want people to feel confident of that and really like lean into producing something new that captures a point of view that couldn't have come from anything else but the set of interviews.
Have you seen less experienced researchers struggle with that, or is it not correlated with sort of experience in the school of hard knocks?
I think people that come from academia, are steeped in analysis and synthesis, like far more articulately than I could ever be.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the training. I think the number one question that I think researchers have is like, oh, I don't have time. There's not bandwidth. I don't have resources. And so I think part of right sizing, I guess I wish there was more right sizing and less like, let's just meet the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's this, it's a bad cycle. Like research isn't valued, so we aren't given enough time and resources. So we undercut our process. So we produce less useful stuff. So we don't kind of, we can't break that cycle.
Well, but
easily.
yeah, sort of the other side of that coin is budgeting for it. Do research managers, let's say, even know how to budget for analysis and synthesis? When they're doing a project plan, is it built in this many hours for, do they know how to even do that?
And I think this is in there somewhere, but the ratio I have long heard is 2-to-1. For every hour of data collection you do, you should budget for 2 hours of analysis and synthesis.
Wow.
And I think people would assume that the ratio is reversed. But
I would have.
Yeah. And I mean, I really, when I have spent those hours myself, like you just get to really interesting places that you couldn't have got to. And you can feel really confident after some interviews. Like, I got this. This is super interesting. We got these points. Here's the problem. We get it. We're confident. We're confident and comfortable. But when you put the time in, like there's just a whole other level of stuff there.
Well, then
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you put that time and you got it, and then I assume you can communicate it for impact, which you probably couldn't do without the analysis and the synthesis.
Yeah, I was just talking with a group of people last week about the we already knew that phenomenon that researchers sometimes encounter, where they report something and they're like, "Oh yeah, we already knew that." And
now you have data at least to support your intuition. I suppose that's a comeback, but
yes, right. Validation is where you go from an assumption to information, and that is right. You've reduced the risk by doing that. Yes, you do have data. There's interesting cognitive biases like hindsight bias, is where we convince ourselves that we already knew something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think great research like feels true. Like it's not, we're not in the business of the big aha reveal surprise. Did you know that people have this and this coming out of their ears and they like to drink chocolate? That's not what we're in the business of. We're in the business of like crystallizing something fundamental and profound. I mean, not always, but let's just say that's what I want to be in the business of doing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you hear that, you don't go, whoa, you might have a more like muted reaction. And I think sometimes that reaction shows up as like, well, oh yeah, we already knew that. Well, you didn't know it because you haven't acted on it. You haven't put it into your products and services and your design. Um, and and so I think there's a burden on the researcher to communicate more clearly
Mm-hmm.
the delta, right? It's that we used to think this, but actually what we've learned is this, and they might look very, very similar. And this is this is where our jargon shows up, not just price point and research, those words that people use, but we use words like motivation or solution or faster or smarter, and we don't really unpack what those words mean to if we don't unpack what those words mean to our users and to our colleagues, then we may sound like we're saying things that we already know. But if you can deconstruct those words and kind of share, no, we're saying smart to mean fast, and they're saying smart to mean efficient. And efficiency is actually a different value
That's
proposition
right.
than fast. And those are the insights that we bring back. But if we don't take time to unpack them and communicate them with some nuance, then we don't get to have that impact that we're hoping to have.
Speaking of words, first of all, it's so much fun to talk with you. And I hope if you're listening to this podcast, you get a sense of Steve's choice of words. And it's just like the sort of humanizing of research in a way that is, I think, unique to your voice. I really appreciate it. I know that readers have always appreciated it in your writing because your voice is very strong in the writing. So, those of you who are listening and are new to Steve's work, if you like what he's saying, you'll like reading him as well. It's a great voice. And so, thank you for that, Steve. I want to move on to the gift. Speaking of our listeners, what did you bring? Because we do have to wrap up, and I know you brought something for them. What do you want to shine some light on?
I would like to highlight the show How To with John Wilson. It's a show, at least in the U.S., is on HBO that just wrapped up its third season. It's a combination of interviewing, storytelling, observational research, documentary filmmaking. I'm not going to say watch this and you'll be a better researcher. I think it's adjacent to a lot of what we're talking about. But he's a unique character that kind of goes around New York and kind of collects B-roll and like puts it together and stuff. And then seemingly serendipitously goes to like Burning Man and maybe doesn't get the interview or goes here or goes there and finds all kinds of people and presents them. He's not entirely judgment free in how he presents them, but he's sort of fairly low key in encountering interesting, sort of strange people. He meets with like a group of people that love the film Avatar, and at first you're like, wow, what a bunch of weirdos. He sort of holds them up and lets us see them as weirdos, but he sticks with them. And his hand is sort of invisible, and yet like I find myself feeling a lot of empathy towards these people who are really passionate about a thing that they love. So why was I a minute ago like marginalizing them? And so he does a lot with empathy and storytelling, and there's a lot in there that I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I've only had a limited exposure to him, but he has sort of this observational superpower, I think, that makes me think of like Werner Herzog. I mean, not that they do it the same way, but they observe in a way that is really highlighted in their work. It's sort of the center of their work. And I think it's pretty cool, just even if you're not a researcher, but I gotta think as a researcher, it's gold. So
Agreed.
Thanks for sharing that. Steve, it's great talking with you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the second edition. The rest of y'all, I hope you consider picking up a copy of it. It's on pre-order until October 17th at 15% off. If you already own the book, and we know that, we've actually going to be letting you know there's an even better deal for you. and we'll email you if you're in our database of owners of the first edition. We're even running a bunch of contests that are pretty cool. Just check LinkedIn. You could search for Steve or me, and you'll see them. Great to talk with you, Steve. Looking forward to getting the new one out there, and then we can start thinking about the third edition.
Thanks, Lou.
Oh, that nervous laugh. I love it. All right, Steve. Thanks again. Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. I'd love it if you tell a friend to have a listen, and check out our website for over 100 podcasts with other interesting people. You'll find them all at rosenfeldreview.com.